members present will signify by saying their name. Fran,
Fran McLennan, aye. Here.
Katie,
Katie Whitby
Smith,
here.
Bill,
Bill Stockert here.
Nancy Wren, Shelley here.
Shelley Dawson here.
Okay. I think that's all that's here for right now. I also want to, in attendance is Marsha Allgaier, Town Housing Coordinator, Andrea Reed, Board Liaison. And we welcome our work session leader, Andrea Aldana, Director of Housing Advocacy with the Community Development Partnership. We are very happy to have her here to do this work session with us today. On the agenda reads, we are to create during this work session an action plan for implementing an educational strategy regarding the Penrose proposal to build housing at the former Cape Cod 5 headquarters at 19 West Road. So welcome. Today, Andrea has talked with our individual members to help her make the most of our time together. The goal of this session is to create an action plan in support of this initiative. I'll turn the meeting over to Andrea.
Hey, everybody. It's nice that I've had a chance to touch base with all of you before we talk today, because I feel like we can just dive in. Nancy, am I able to share my screen? I guess I'll find out in a second.
You are, Andrea, you can.
Okay.
Mia will help you. And Nancy James is here also, another member of the committee has just logged in.
Okay. If you don't mind, I'm going to leave it like this rather than present it, because it just lets me see a little bit better. And since it's a small group, is that okay with everybody?
Sure.
Okay. So I wanted to go over the way that I think this meeting could be most helpful for all of you. Just a little intro, obviously I've had a chance to talk to all of you, but I am here to kind of like help you organize your thoughts and come up with a work product. But I am not the expert in your town, so please do interrupt me if I, have a date wrong, or if you think there's some pertinent information that should be included, because I look to you to be the experts on housing in your town and process in your town. Because I'm sharing my screen, it would be really helpful if you want to speak, if you just kind of like jump in or raise your hand physically. I can't see all of you on my screen, but one of my goals to make this meeting really efficient is to not have any dead air time. So I've designed an agenda that moves pretty quickly. And part of that will be, if we're always talking and always moving forward on the agenda. Just trying to bear with me one moment, because this is taking up my whole screen and I can't see my personal agenda. Let's see what I can do about that. Okay, here we go. What else did I want to share with you? So the purpose of this work session is to create a specific action plan to support the Penrose CPA request. The plan that I am offering for you, or what you'll end up with, I think is actually something that can be adapted to any initiative. It really just kind of puts some structure in place to help you all get an education implementation plan rolling, regardless of what the focus is. So what I'd like to end up with is an actual work plan. In order to keep this meeting to 1 hour, I don't think that we're going to be able to fully flesh out the entire work plan. But I do recommend that Nancy, maybe you and I, and perhaps Marsha could get together after this meeting to kind of fill in all the blanks based on what the committee wants to do. Does that feel like a good compromise?
Good.
Okay. So what we are going to be talking about is on the screen. I suggest that we talk a little bit about audiences, prioritize the activities that you already laid out in your civic engagement strategies document, which Nancy shared out. Talk a little bit about who's going to do what. I have a suggestion on how you can organize the division of labor, so to speak. Create a work plan. What I'm really doing is I'm offering you a document that can be filled in, and I'm happy to work with Nancy and Marsha to fill all that in for you, but I want to give you a sense of what the elements are. And then kind of leave a little bit of time for thinking through, well, what's missing as far as capacity or skill in order to implement this work plan, and then we can just check out. And we're going to do all of that before 5 o'clock. Is there anything that anyone would like to add or any questions before I move on? All right, so let's dive into whose support is needed The reason why I think this is a useful conversation to have is because it helps target the activities, right? So rather than doing a whole bunch of community engagement activities, we're thinking about the best way to reach these particular audiences. And your civic engagement document is pretty comprehensive. So I am not suggesting that you add to it. You could edit it if you would like to maybe focus on fewer activities. But I think it's a really good starting point. So essentially, just to kind of do some thinking for you, to keep the conversation going, I would split your audience into 2 buckets. And I think it's helpful to think about the 2 buckets this way because it kind of helps you strategize with where you're putting your attention in your content. So I think about intra-municipal, you need to get support within the town, right? One of the roles of an affordable housing committee that I've seen, across the Cape is facilitating alignment among boards and committees within a town. And I think that you can do that through education, and certainly the activities that you all came up with are educational activities. So I would say that these are the different people, different groups that fall into your municipal bucket, right? You have your trust, which I think is on board already, but is worth mentioning. Your CPC, obviously, because they're the ones who are approving the funding request. The select board and the finance committee, because their votes on those particular warrant articles are going to be printed in the warrant, and that influences voters, right? So I think it's really important to think of them as major stakeholders in your support building process here. And then the planning board you had listed in your civic engagement activities document, so I wanted to include it here. Are there any other municipal groups that you think should be included in this slide here?
Yes.
Who?
The cultural district, because they're going to tie you to economic development eventually, and / chamber, because they represent a voice to bring working people in.
The Chamber of Commerce?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to include them down here as a non-municipal entity. And so before we go too much further on other groups that you would want to reach out to, I'm focusing right now on within the town, but we're going to talk about how you want to put together a network of partners. And so Chamber of Commerce should be included in that network, and it's going to be a very extensive list with lots of other partners. So that I would consider to be outside of the town government. So when I say municipal, I mean town government. So are there any other town boards or committees that you think should be included in this list? These are people that you want to get formal support of the project from. We good? Okay. And then the second group is, of course, voters, all of them. I mean, really, it's voters who show up at town meeting. And to the extent that you have any demographic data about who tends to show up at Orleans town meeting, that would be great to know. But generally speaking, we don't really know that so well. All we know is, how many people show up and what constitutes a majority. But
Andrea,
yes.
I did check that in. It's a 2/3 majority. The Penrose request from
It is.
CPC is taken out of the general budget of the CPC requests, and it's a 2/3 majority for that one item, the $2
Gotcha.
million.
So that's a lot of voters you need to educate.
Yep.
Good. So that's good to know. So your education for voters are going to be very different from your education for municipal town boards and committees, right? When you're looking for support from town boards and committees, it's generally pretty straightforward. You're generally asking to be put on an agenda, making a presentation, and perhaps asking for a letter of support. So I think within the town, it's pretty straightforward. What you do to educate voters, of course, is where your whole long list of activities come into play. But I think it's just useful to have your audience in mind when you're prioritizing activities. So I just wanted to quickly do a little run through of who your audience is. Is there anything that you think needs to be on here? Because this is going to affect your work plan. Anything else we're missing? Understanding that there's going to be lots more organizations and partners. Okay, let's move along.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. It occurs to me, not only cultural district, but historical commission.
Okay.
because one of the things that I think that we want to do is help to preserve the historical sense of the town, the community.
And what about
Okay.
architectural review? Because isn't that a big piece of the decision-making, or is it not? Or is that going to be done by the time we get done?
Andrea's shaking her head no.
Oh, I'm sorry, only on this one because they're not changing the building, Nancy. I think they're going to be much more important, for instance, on a Governor Prince.
That's what I was thinking. We are going to try to apply this to various projects, so maybe we ought to add it in there for when necessary. Or do we just adapt this when we go to the next group, to the next project? Either way.
So add, or I'm hearing don't add? Don't add, okay.
What about zoning board of appeals? We have the planning board, but we don't have zoning board of appeals. Should they
Yeah.
be-
That's an interesting conversation. So I'm curious what you all think about the ZBA. My understanding is that once a comprehensive permit application is submitted, that there really shouldn't be much communication between, say, the trust and the ZBA, for example. So I think maintaining that separation, both actual separation and perceived separation is really important. However, it is equally important from an advocacy perspective to address misinformation as it arises during these public hearings. So I did think about this. My thought around the ZBA is, I don't know that you want to educate the ZBA about the project. In fact, I don't think you can. However, you should have a plan in place to participate in public hearings.
Okay, because Nancy did write a letter to ZBA regarding Penrose.
But an application has not been submitted yet for a comprehensive permit, is my understanding. Is that correct?
No, it has been. But
Has
the
been?
town asked for any boards to write a letter of support or questioning. It was sent to all of the boards in the town. So mine was pretty general on why we need affordable housing and why we like Penrose.
And
Okay.
Andrea, if I can add, at a conversation with the committee chair, he was pleading for some kind of support from various committees on the town, because he said they spend 90% of their time on single family home issues or they're not prepared to deal with housing projects. So educating them in a way that's helpful and legal would be great.
On the process or the project?
How a particular project, when it comes in front of participating in a hearing or a letter of support, before the hearing, any input, because he said right now all they have is, for instance, what happens in site plan review or the documents through the state, through a very narrow process.
Okay. My first thought is that Massachusetts Housing Partnership has an excellent Chapter 40B workbook. And that might be a good resource to share. In a perfect world, you could bring MHP in to do a training, right? And maybe you can. But the workbook, I think, is a really great starting place. So that would be my suggestion. But I do hear you on including the ZBA. So I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'm going to put ZBA under voters, because I think the issue here is that in a public hearing, resident input influences ZBA outcome, right? And so I'm suggesting that the work with ZBAs is really around having a presence during the public hearing process. You can disagree with me. We can change it later. But let's land on that for now, if that's okay. Anything else? You've already given me some good additions here. Okay, let's move along. So now that we know that our audiences are, that's going to affect the way that different pieces of content are distributed. So let's kind of talk about that content. So if we have the two buckets, the voters, and I'll put the ZBA under there, and then the municipal boards and committees, what I did here was I looked at your list of civic engagement activities and I just categorized them and kind of organize them a little bit. So there's nothing in here that comes from me. This all comes from you. And what I'm suggesting here to save us some time, and let's discuss it, is these are what I think are the distribution avenues that make the most sense for these specific audiences. So, like I said, for the municipal boards and committees, you're really doing presentations. And then I also teased out presentations by voters or voters and residents. Same thing, different way of thinking about them. Because in your civic engagements activities list, you talked a lot about recruiting advocates to speak on the project's behalf as well. So that finding those advocates, supporting those advocates, making sure that they're showing up at meetings and know where to be and all that, that's a whole activity area. So I included that here under municipal boards and committees because ultimately the audience for those engagements is still a municipal board or committee. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. And then for voters, then you have like all the really fun stuff, right? The videos, the handouts, the website updates. So I put that all under voters. Now, we could spend an hour just coming up with more activities to add to this list, but
It's not.
given limited capacity, let's instead have a conversation about what you think would be the most impactful activities on this list and see if there's anything that you think could be taken off or is not realistic in a short time frame because you're focusing on a current project. So yes, I have some thoughts about this, but I thought it would be great to hear your input.
Somebody jump in.
I was on a telephone call or a Zoom call the other day with a committee, and I can't remember what it was, but it was Orleans, and somebody mentioned that to reach our younger voters, we might want to think about how to use social media.
Mhm.
And I thought, wow, that's a great idea. So I wonder if there's something that we could do with this that would reach maybe not only younger voters, but because a lot of people are on social media now, and sometimes Twitter is how you get your stuff. So just a thought.
Yeah, if I can respond to that, you do have a Facebook page listed here as a distribution avenue for project summary updates. But
Mhm.
I would say that any content that the committee creates can be shared on social media,
Okay, great.
right? So I think the focus here is think about what are the things, the work products that need to be created with a specific audience in mind, and then distribute those same products in 1,000 different ways, any way that
Great.
you possibly can.
And can I jump onto that? Because for instance, social media, there are already some groups like the Cultural District that have access to a Facebook account. So you don't have to invent your own wheel. If once those conversations start, newsletters, stuff like that, you may be able to piggyback on other things in town already.
Right. You know, maybe before we continue with the feedback, maybe it's helpful if I just kind of go through the way that I categorize this under the voter section. So there were not duplicated activities, but the list was like create and distribute letters to the editor, create and distribute handouts. So I've organized this in terms of like the action that needs to be taken. For the create and distribute, these are kind of tangible things, right? A letter template, a handout, which could be a fact sheet, an infographic, a brochure, as you laid out, a project summary update, a video. So that's all content. So I'm encouraging you to think about the content and the distribution of that content separately. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in the roles. So what I did was I organized your content by the way it's going to be treated. So for those tangible work products, they need to be created, they need to be distributed. So that's one bucket. For the working with groups in the community, I put that under education, and that has to do with developing your network of partners. They're going to help you with distribution, not content creation, right? Coming up with a PowerPoint presentation that you use, a canned presentation that you use when you are developing that network of partners, that's going to allow for consistency and also streamline your efforts, frankly, right? If you're just using one PowerPoint for all of those different meetings. And the rolling calendar of community events for outreach. So this was your idea. The idea is that you're keeping a running list of opportunities for education based on the partners that you've established, and you're going to use the same content that you've created for those events. So it's just all kind of tied in from a messaging and branding perspective, if you have a consistency in your materials. And then I put the web page as a separate thing because really any of this content could show up on the website, right? But usually having the website updated happens because it's someone's role to do that. So I think just figuring out who's going to be the person that pushes your content to the town website is going to be an important thing for you to select. Does that make sense, the way that I've organized this?
Yeah.
What I'm trying to do is make this as easy as possible, not duplicate efforts, and make sure that you get a lot of mileage out of anything that you create. Okay, so my question was, is there anything here that is least important for this specific project, given the short timeline? Fran.
Videos. We don't have time.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah. Does that work for everybody?
Yep.
It's a great idea, but maybe later. Anything else? Everything else feels doable and important? Okay. So I'm going to move us along. And let's talk about roles and assignments. So this is where things really happen. Nothing is going to get done unless somebody does it, right? And I think when I had this conversation with all of you, there's an understanding that some folks just need to sign up for specific things so that we can get it done. So I have a suggestion. In order to make this roles and assignments conversation adaptable to other initiatives, I suggest that you create little task forces of pairs of committee members, 2 people. So A, nobody is doing something by themselves. And B, it's not, a large group discussion, so you can be really efficient with your time. It's not a quorum. It's just 2 people that can work together on an aspect of community engagement, and they can become kind of experts in that little area. And I'm suggesting 3 pairs. Ideally, there's no overlap, so no one is getting really overwhelmed. One is a pair, I'm calling it a task force, but it's really just 2 people. One is a task force that's focused on messaging. And so this pair will be in charge of deciding what are the talking points that are really, really important to the Penrose project. Without getting really deep into what I think those talking points could be, I'll just say that this is a whole conversation in itself. You already have a lot of that content with your housing needs assessment and just other meetings and work documents that you've produced, your housing production plan, et cetera, et cetera. You have all of this. It just needs to be made friendlier to your voters, right? The audience that you're trying to reach. The reason why I think it's really important to have a task force that's only focused on messaging is because that way everything that the committee produces is on message and everyone is saying the same thing and you've all decided what the important points are and you're just keep repeating those same important points. And it's also because writing and messaging is a lot of work and uses a lot of brain space, and doing that on top of creating, the PowerPoint that goes along with it is a lot of work. So I'm breaking this up this way. So the messaging is about coming up with, the project summary updates, talking points, any copy, any writing content that's going to be used for all of these different activities that you laid out. So if it's not obvious, I'm going to be asking you all to raise your hand and join one of these pairs when we're done with this little spiel. The next task force is the content creation. So this is the group that gets those talking points, gets that message, and turns it into a work product, like a PowerPoint presentation, like a letter of support, like what else was on the list? An infographic, right? So turning that message that you're trying to get out into the community into something that can then be distributed. And then the third task force or pair is focused on the distribution. And the distribution is going to look different depending on what the work product is. So if it's a handout, the distribution might include getting it posted on the website, posting it on Facebook, and sharing it with some groups that are going to put it in their newsletter. For a PowerPoint, the distribution could look like doing a presentation to the planning board. It could look like making contact with the media to get letters to the editor actually placed in the newspaper. It's about getting the content out. So you're focusing on what are we saying, how are we saying it, and how are we getting the word out? Those three different groups. And the reason why I think this is useful is because you can use this again, regardless of what the project is, rather than saying this group is going to be doing the letter of support. Once the letter of support is done, okay, what's the next step and who's doing it, right? This way it's very clear. When you decide, okay, the committee wants to do X, Y, Z, you already know who's going to do which piece of it. And in your work plan, you can decide when the little internal deadlines are so that everything can happen on time. So that's my suggestion. I'd love to hear your thoughts about whether or not you think that's useful. And if so, we can assign people. What do you think? Does that work for you?
I think it definitely makes sense. I like how it's broken up. I like that we could sort of move quickly between each one with only two people making decisions. My question is, so messaging. So I would probably volunteer for messaging. And I'm just thinking, what are we saying? Are we using just the housing study, and are we going there right now? Or should I hold my question for
Yeah,
how we
so
make these decisions?
if we want to get out at 5, I suggest that that's a separate conversation.
Okay.
And what I was telling Nancy was that if I can be helpful with anything, I think this would be the task force that I would be the most helpful to if you need help. But I think those decisions would be made by, suggested by the pair, talk to the chair. It's difficult, but it's not rocket science, right? Like you have all this content, you just need to figure out what's most pertinent for Penrose.
And we've done some of this already. We just have to narrow it down and make it more consistent too, I think.
Well, and how many points are enough?
I think we can
guess.
talk about all that.
Okay.
So my experience, it's been several times now that towns have asked for support around creating talking points, usually around public hearings. And usually you just think, okay, so what's the issue? What's the community's concern? Because at that point, it's usually come up in some different areas. Maybe it's water, maybe it's traffic. Like there's the same 5 categories that always come up. So really you can create talking points about all of them in advance if you really want to, or you can wait and see what floats to the top. But either way, having, 5, 10, whatever, depending on what the where these talking points are going to be used, they can be canned. And I really think like this is something that could get you a lot of mileage for a while. It's not something that needs to be tweaked constantly.
As you were describing them, I was also thinking of the messaging that I would volunteer for.
Okay.
If
Great.
Katie, if you're okay with that.
We may all want to vote, be on the messaging committee.
Well, we definitely want to keep it. I mean, let's keep it to 3 or less.
Yeah, speak up quickly. Yeah.
I just say we've been trying really hard for the last month or 2 to get our messaging straight. And so now we all want to be on this committee, and I think that's why, because we've been frustrated with it. But we can share what we've done. I mean, in terms of what this group comes up with, then we can all share it, right? It's not written in stone, so we will have a chance to reflect on it, all of us, I would hope, after something has been done before we even send it to the next group, because I think that's our key piece. And the other piece that we need to consider, is our messaging answering negative perceptions, or is it presenting a positive image of this project? Because that's 2 ways of going about messaging. I have my own preference to that, but I don't know how the committee and this group feels about that. So I think we need to, we need to be aware of people's concerns, but I'm not sure that answering them directly sometimes makes more concerns appear. So that's just the question to me.
No, I love that. That's a great point. I think a lot of times we're always just being reactive, and there's definitely an opportunity here to be proactive as well. But again, I do think that those are all things that can be decided within a pair and then brought to the committee. I would just, you brought me in here because you need action. And so I think messaging is fascinating and a lot of fun to talk about, but ultimately you need to move forward. So there needs to be a balance between reflection and action, right?
Yes,
You know
ma'am.
this. So we have 2 people for the messaging task force already. We could technically have a third, but if we could keep it at 2, unless there's someone who's really dying to be a part of it, I think we should move on.
You should be the third, Andrea, as a resource.
So I'm happy to, that's really up to, I guess, George and Marcia and Nancy to talk about that. But yes, I would love to do that. So Nancy, why don't you let me know? what the
If
town is like.
Katie and Bill feel they need help, you're a good resource for them.
Well,
That'd
I
be
think
fun.
when I talked to you before, we said that each of the groups, we wanted to maybe use your expertise as a review of what we came up with, so that she'll maybe be able to see it from an outside point of view. So we did say maybe that would be a good use for you following up if we presented our things and then let Andrea give her opinion about it and see how. And also we can defend our opinion to her. We don't have to go with her opinion, but we can defend, and part of that defending helps us clarify our position as well. So I think that would be a good use for her outside opinion, outside opinion.
Yep, I'd love to help you with that.
I think in terms of the content creation, does that mean we have to physically make it, or do we come up with it and then somebody else can put it together? Because that's probably, I would like to work on that, but I'm not the most adept at creating things with a computer. So
I think it's actual creation because somebody needs to make the actual end product and there's nobody else based on this structure. So if you want to think about what's going to be written in it, then that's a messaging activity. But this is really about getting the messaging, making a really pretty PowerPoint, getting the messaging, making a beautiful handout that's ready for print
and who's
and
on
work product.
that can do that?
So that's a
I'll
question.
jump at once.
I'll give it a try. I'll be on a learning curve with it, but
I think the nice thing about having one pair do this is that you come up with a look and then you just recycle it. And that's easy and consistent from a branding perspective. So it doesn't have to be.
I can work on that with you, Fran. We can muddle together.
If you
So
I know what
Andrea-
I'd like
you
to, I know what I'd like to see. I can see it in my mind. It's just a question of getting it on the screen. So we
If
probably
you
can-
need technical assistance, I can be backup. I'm not supposed to be an active committee member, but I can be technical support.
Excellent.
you.
Thank
Okay.
you. That's great.
So Andrea, can I just ask you a quick question on the content creation? Thinking back to your last slide about what the content creation we thought would be doable for this. Did we decide that we all think that all of those things can all be done between now and May, other than the video?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Going back to putting my name on that one.
Yeah.
What about Marcia? Do you think that Marcia might be a better person to put on instead of me? I'm thinking maybe I'd be better on the distribution piece.
Well, I was going to volunteer for each and all of you to the extent that I can, but I certainly can help any of the groups. And, I have some skills, but I'm not real good with graphics, but I do PowerPoints quite well, so I can do the PowerPoint. So I think I can help any and all of the groups if you guys actually power the thought behind it.
Okay.
I'm
I'm just gonna
putting
volunteer
non-committee
for that, 'cause
members.
I've done PowerPoints too, but not recently, but so.
I'm putting non-committee members in parentheses. You're not lesser people. That's just what that means. Are we ready to move on to distribution? Nancy, did you want to move to distribution? Is that what you were saying? Nancy
Hmm.
Wren.
That's getting it out, right? Getting it to the people.
Yep. I would also, so distribution, I would say is about getting it out, but I think this is also where developing a network of partners fits in.
Right. I think I might want to work on that one instead. Plus also scheduling a lot of this, how this is going to I think the schedule is really important in this and keeping abreast of what's going on. So I think I might be better off there as long as Marcia's going to join in with Fran.
Cool. So we could use one more person in content creation and one person in distribution.
Is Richard on the call? I didn't see, I can't see my whole screen now.
think
Is
so.
Richard here? No.
I would love to help out. I'm so new at this that I feel like I'm not bringing a whole lot to it, and so probably messaging is not a good place for me. I have done PowerPoint slides, but again, I think like Marcia, I'm not great on the graphic side. I'm happy to do anything, any kind of legwork connected with the distribution or whatever. So if that's a better place, or you have more people than you need, if you all think, yeah, the newest person on here should just shut up and watch what's going on, and maybe next time, that's fine too. I need sort of some guidance with that.
Andrea, this is Marcia. One thought is, and part of what I talked to you about, and you gave me the Shelter Force connection, is that a lot of the graphics are out there if you know where to look. So some of it might be the research. So that's somewhat the content creation, but it's really to express some of the commonly stated issues around affordable housing, but in an attractive, concise way. So maybe that is as much. So it's not like we have to create every single thing we're going to hand out. We may be able to pull it from someone as long as there's proprietary and copyright and stuff like that, or you can ask permission. That may be part of what content creation can do.
100%. Shelley?
Yeah, I was working on that a little bit a while ago, a few months ago, and I'm happy to continue with that content creation part for a bit.
Great. And Nancy, James, to get to what you're saying, I totally hear that. And I think a lot of people feel that way. And I also think that the committee wants to do a lot of work, and it's only going to be done by the people in this room, right? And so maybe we're not all perfect at doing anything, but we're going to do the best we can, right? And it's going to be great. So I think this is a new space for y'all. You've done a lot of discussing, and now you're in this space where there's a lot of projects coming online at once, and we just need to full steam ahead. And it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be a great first try, and we'll learn along the way for the next project.
Okay. Put me on distribution. Okay. Nancy certainly has all the expertise and background that I don't have, so I'll rely on her for that. So we'll have a Nancy team.
Yeah, well, I think that's actually perfect for you being slightly newer to the community. You'll get to meet a lot of community organizations and people. So I think that's great. And all of these task forces have support, right? Okay, so the other boards and committees, something that came up in our conversations is the role of other boards and committees. And so I pulled this out of our Housing 101. So the question here is, you all work very closely with the Affordable Housing Trust. And so obviously there is a role here for the trust, and I'm not 100% sure what that is. And I don't think we need to decide right now. But what I want to offer to you all as you're thinking through these different activities and how the trust can be helpful is that when we talk about, at the CDP, when we talk about community engagement, we often talk about this idea of assembling your engagement team, because obviously the Affordable Housing Committee does not work in a vacuum, right? As we've discussed, there's a lot of other boards and committees in the town that care a lot about housing and are working on the same issues. So I would offer that when you're thinking about mostly distribution, that you could divide up roles and responsibilities along this basic framework. And so what I see in communities that are, quote unquote, very high functioning, who maybe have had a trust and an affordable housing committee for a very long time and kind of figured out who's doing what, is that the housing committee, or in some communities, housing partnership, but the housing committee is really focused on policy and advocacy. So the housing committee is the group that's always looking at what's the new cool thing that other communities are doing, and can we do that here in Orleans? And if we can, how might that look like? And let's pitch it to the trust and the select board. If there is an effort that's coming down the pipeline, like the Cape Cod 5, and you want to align boards and committees within the town to generate a lot of support internally and externally with voters, that is generally a role the Affordable Housing Committee takes on, which is, that's what this whole conversation is about, right? Educating, educating and advocating. The trust is much less focused on policy and advocacy, generally speaking, and more focused on specific initiatives really related to being stewards of trust funding. So they're the ones that are stewarding the development process through the RFP for any particular development. They're offering support for initiatives that the Affordable Housing Committee might bring forth. And they're reviewing applications for trust funds, which is a lot. But that's generally what I see their activities restricted to in most towns. The planning board plays a role, but they're really focused on zoning and master planning, which obviously is really tied into housing. So you want their support, but they're not doing the other things generally, is what I see. And then of course you have your town staff and any other consultants that you bring in to, do community visioning or action plans or housing production plans or whatever the case may be. So the reason why I bring this up is that I know that the trust has been really involved in Penrose and their support is really important, and I think you already have it. But I just would encourage you to start working on focusing on the separation areas. You guys have really clarified how you collaborate really well. And I think it needs to be equally clear what your separate lanes are so that you're not duplicating efforts. Because I see both groups talking a lot about the issue, and that's fantastic, but there's only limited time and capacity here, right? So I think it's just useful to know, this group is going to be talking to the CPC, this group is going to be talking to the select board, and if you both want to do it, maybe you do it together. But that way it's really intentional and it looks like a cohesive, aligned plan. Does that make sense? So the reason why I bring this up is that when you are working on building support from, say, your finance committee, how do you want to work with the trust, right? Do you want to create a PowerPoint that you use with the trust when you're doing a joint meeting? Do you want to work with them to develop a letter of support that they then distribute, but it's got your message? Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but it's a separate type of strategy that you would use internally at the town level versus communicating with voters. So I don't think you need to fill this in, but it's just kind of an open question. Do you want to identify an activity that you are doing alongside another board or committee at this time?
I would suggest maybe wait and see what we come up with our first tasks before we get too overwhelmed.
Wait, you don't think you have enough? That's what I figured, but I did want to just lay it out there that most of the work that we're talking about in the task forces above are really externally focused. So if you want to create some strategy internally, aside from just doing presentations, that here's a space for you to think that through after I share this presentation with you. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about really, really briefly, and not even really talk about it, but just bring it to your forefront of your mind, is that we're going to be building a work plan, and that work plan needs to fit in around certain important dates. Here are a few of those dates. We don't have time right now to come up with an exhaustive timeline of all of the different important dates that you might consider based on when CPC is meeting, select board is meeting, finance committee is meeting, et cetera, et cetera. But I did put this here as a placeholder for you all to be thinking about what are other important dates that you want to consider when you're creating deadlines for your work plan. Is there anything that anyone would like to add to this that is like a really important date that the committee needs to be aware of?
Well, I think you didn't put it in there, but in between March 11th and April 11th is the time when these things will be voted on by various committees.
Yeah,
So
I didn't have
it's
specific
not a
dates.
final vote, it's just are they in favor it or against it? So there may be opportunities then to speak before one of these committees and give your own, they may invite us. We may invite ourselves, we may not do anything, but that would be an opportunity for the finance committee and the select board as they look for those things. So there may be opportunities for that.
So I didn't allocate time for a discussion around dates. Like I said, this is just to bring to the forefront that you need to know these dates in order to have a useful work plan. But Nancy Wren, if I can, two Nancys, if I can make a suggestion, maybe I can talk with you and Marcia to figure out what other relevant dates are in here so that we're ready when we're ready to fill in the work plan when we have our next conversation. Does that work?
Sure.
And then 4:48. All right. Wow, we're doing great. Time flies though. So for the work plan, I'm going to stop sharing because I'm going to show you something else. We definitely, if we want to get out at 5, we do not have time to fill this out now, but it sounds like I'm going to be working with Marcia and Nancy to fill this out soon. But just to give you a sense of what I'm talking about when I say work plan, it's very simple. Can you see the spreadsheet?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm suggesting that we just come up with a work plan of deadlines. And so the first column is going to be the activities that we laid out in the 2 buckets, municipal and voter. Ooh, did my video start lagging? Looks a little choppy. Anyway, and then create a specific deadline for each of the 3 task forces. So that's what I mean by messaging, content creation, and distribution. A final date of completion for that task. So if it's presenting to the CPC, then it's going to be the meeting where you're presenting. Who is the lead on that activity and any notes. And this will be an internal document that you can use for any type of community engagement activity. Anything that needs to be added to make this more useful? Going once.
I guess a start date might be, date of completion looks terrific. The start date is more concerning to me. When do we start this?
Oh, well, start date for everything is yesterday.
Yesterday, okay. All right.
No, but I hear you. Yeah, let's think about that when we fill it out, because that might make sense.
It has to be a little bit staggered, right? I mean, it has to be.
Yeah, well, I think so you're thinking about distribution, is that why you ask?
Oh yeah, but even content, the message should come before the content, even though they're looking at ideas. I think we don't want people to go off and make all this content and it doesn't fit with our message. So
right, that's why I've put the 3 columns, because messaging needs to happen before content creation, needs to happen before distribution, needs to happen before completion.
Right.
So we're going to work our way backwards.
So you may want to put in a date of completion in between each of those. So when is the messaging going to be complete?
Yep.
Well, that's what I was imagining the cell would be. So present to CPC, say the meeting is on Thursday. That means you need messaging by today, right?
No, we don't have to present. We have to be there on Thursday, but we have already presented, but we just need to be there. Someone needs to be there on Thursday from our.
It's just an example.
Okay, I just want to make sure they didn't think we have to go.
Yeah, no. This is not an assignment. This is just an example.
Okay.
So if the meeting is on, this is not true. This is fictional. If the meeting is on the 5th, then the distribution is going to be the same for this particular activity as the date of completion. That won't be true for all activities. The content is going to need to be done by the 4th. This is just an example.
Okay, well, let's make a realistic one, which is not tomorrow.
No. This is going to be based on what you all can do, what your capacity is, and when the actual activity is going to be most effective. So it's going to be very different for a letter to the editor compared to, a presentation to the select board.
But Andre, if I could just pop in for a quick second, is it fair to say that like the content creation and the distribution, they could be brainstorming those while we're working on the messaging? They don't necessarily need to wait for us, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. This is just when things need to be done so that the next
Okay.
Like it's like a rally, a rally race, relay race,
Race,
relay
yeah.
race. Yeah. And again, it's going to look a little different depending on the activity. This is just a general framework. Okay. Unless there's any other questions, I'm just going to kind of wrap us up with a couple little things. I have 2 questions for you.
Fran has a
Oh,
question.
please.
Can I ask a question? Yeah, I wanted to go back to the engagement team.
Okay.
And I understand how you're trying to have the committee and the trust have separate tasks, which makes sense. On the other hand, I think that the team and the trust and the committee can't be exactly divided, because what the committee recommends to the trust includes what's financially feasible.
Okay.
So it's that you can't make a recommendation without having some input about the finances. And I'm thinking about, the reason I'm bringing it up right now is I'm thinking about the CPC meeting, which is tomorrow evening. And it seems appropriate for both the trust and the committee to be speaking with the CPC. And I don't know, the way I have thought about the committee and the trust is it's like they're co-chairs of a larger committee, if you will. And that they work together. They don't just have separate tasks and pass it off to the other without collaborating. So for example, if one person could be there, but the other one can't be, they can fill in for each other. I mean, there is a fluidity that we have created along the way, which I think works in many ways. Even while I think we need to, as you suggest, be more clear about what our separate roles are.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I think one thing to keep in mind is developing expertise within your committee. It's useful, maybe just right now and not forever, but it's useful to know, okay, whenever there's this kind of request, the Affordable Housing Committee comes in to talk about housing needs, and the trust comes in to talk about economic viability, financial feasibility, right? Do you have to do that? No, but just having those like clear different categories just makes it easier for people to prepare and be able to like show up at a meeting next week.
The message is different, but it may be that both teams are there to give their respective messages.
Oh, I think they absolutely should be. Yes, if that was not clear. Yes, I agree with you.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks for clarifying.
Okay. 6 minutes left. I only have 2 questions for you. One is, and I meant to switch this. It is, what further education or support is needed in order to help you accomplish these tasks?
From you, are you saying?
From anyone. So for example, if someone has signed up for messaging, do they feel like they know enough about housing to develop that messaging? Just an example. It could be anything. And maybe the answer is nothing. We all have exactly what we need. But now is your opportunity to think about like, what are my needs and what are some resources that the committee could use in order to move these activities along?
I mean, I would just hop back to my initial thought about the messaging. So we have the study, which is great and has a lot of statistics in it. But I'm trying to think of everything we've done since then and what other documents might be useful in streamlining our messaging. So I don't want to just rely on that one. I think there's been other helpful things we've done since then.
What about proposals, Penrose proposal, the RFP, the things that, we're not discussing what the trust is doing with that, but there are proposals out there. Penrose has presented what it's going to be like and how you fit that into our need for more housing. So I think we have that information.
I'm sorry, just 1 second for my own clarity. Katie, does this sentence represent what you are saying?
Best practices and I don't know, information or documents or, not just practice, but where are we getting the information to message? what are our sources, I guess is what I'm-
Sources. Okay.
yeah, sources.
Nancy, was there something that you wanted me to capture about your offering?
I just think we should have some reflection on the actual project that's coming up too. I think we should be specific to the project. You can talk, not the cost, but the amenities, the number, the units, what it brings to the town, vitality, how it's going to be a beautiful addition to the neighborhood, those kind of things. I think those are part of the message.
Okay. Anything else?
I think there might also be, everybody seemed a little hesitant about creating the content. So perhaps some type of assistance, maybe professional, we could request funds from the trust or something to do that. Or actually, we
Yeah,
still
but
have money for the
yeah.
education, right?
Yes, we have $5,000 or some portion of, I don't know what we have, but we have some portion of that that we can use for help.
Whether it's,
Is that
you
what
know,
you're saying?
yes.
Okay. Anything else?
Can I ask a question, Andrea?
Of course.
On messaging, have you decided on, and maybe I'm just not remembering, but the various types of messaging, whether it's the long message or the short message or the slogan or the bumper sticker? I'm not clear on what you're creating in your, you've got your audiences, but, and you've got distribution, but what's the attention span of the various people you're talking to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the task force needs to keep the end result in mind, and that's going to largely dictate the format, so to speak. But I think that's the conversation to have at the task force level,
For the messaging people you're talking
Yeah.
about.
keeping it tight. All right,
Can I
10
just-
more seconds on this one.
Can I ask if there is either a town or CDP expert in content creation, technical type stuff that we could
I mean,
consult?
I don't know how you quantify whether someone is an expert, but my colleague Paulinda makes materials for lots of towns, and I think she has a great design eye. So I'll just put that out there.
Okay.
I'm sorry, we do have 1 minute, so I just want to make sure that I ask my last question, which is there anything else about community engagement or the way that different boards and committees are working together, for example, that you need clarity on? It's kind of a different aspect of the same question. So the project itself, it sounds like the specifics on that, you need clarity on that. But what are what's some elephant in the room things that are just keeping you from advancing? Because if you say nothing, then full steam ahead.
I think it's just this clear direction of, you know, what's the best way to communicate our message? Well, first, what is the message? And then what's the best way to communicate it? I think we have a lot of ideas, but perhaps getting some examples that have been done in the past might be helpful.
Can I ask, because it was talked about before, and we've talked about it, what are the specific concerns that people are expressing about the Penrose project? Then you have to decide how you want to address it, but it's a good thing to know. So how do you go about collecting those
Concerns?
Yes. Because I don't know.
I mean, I can.
Out with traffic. I mean, as you said, there are 5 things that every project comes up with, but I don't know the specific.
Sure.
I actually feel we need to be more positive. We need to show why it's good, because somebody can have a concern. You can say, no, that's not going to happen, or it might
No, I'm not
happen.
saying how you address it, but I thought we talked about we need to know what the concern is,
Okay.
and certain concerns you can address. Others, you just have to say
Right.
what the big.
Right.
I think we can also address them in a positive way if we're aware what they are. So if people are concerned about water quality, we can remind them that this area is all that the project will be sewered. So they don't have to worry about that concern.
But I think Marcia's specific question is, how do we find out what those concerns are?
For example, I think I've heard
Conversation.
conversation.
Penrose project, what are those specific concerns and make that. I think that's what she was asking. How do you find out those concerns?
I actually have some already, and I've got copies of concerns, so I can send some of those to you.
Katie, I hope you don't mind. I'm just gonna, oh no, actually, I'm not the host. There you go. Okay.
It's communicating, that goes back to the idea of we're communicating among boards, and how much do we communicate with other boards? And how much do they communicate with us in the advancement of this project? And I think that's really a key question that we've sort of been wondering about. Who speaks to who, and how do we keep up with all that's going on and what people are saying? Because they don't all come directly to us.
So Nancy, I'm in the same mindset as you're describing, because I think this perhaps is under the distribution category. And I think that one of the things we need to do between now and the town meeting is to meet with planning board, meet with the trust, probably meets with the finance committee perhaps. I mean, I don't know exactly what the things are, but I don't know that we have fully communicated to other boards what our philosophy is, what our policy is, what our goals are. The goal of 100 units over 10 years is clear, but other than that, how do we plan to get to that goal? What is our strategy for reaching it? And I think that I, for example, listened to a planning board meeting the other day, and they took a vote about Governor Prince, which is a separate topic, but nonetheless, it's the same. And it impacts Cape Cod 5. And they said, oh, we want to buy the property. And then they started saying, but we don't want to buy it if it's all affordable housing, or we don't want to buy it if it doesn't include this, or we don't want to buy it if it doesn't include that. So they don't know what our philosophy is, what our values are. And I do think that we should be meeting more with assorted boards.
That's a good example, because I was talking to the television during that meeting, trying to explain what we're doing, but of course we couldn't do it because we had the conversation. So I think that's really important.
I could also jump in, because knowing somebody that lives, I've had 2 questions from residents at 18 West who are convinced that if Penrose goes through, West Road will be unimaginably busy. So you've got resident or butter concerns. So, conversations, making yourselves available. I think it's a campaign.
Yeah.
You fight it, you do it at every front you can.
Yeah.
And we also have to remember to say that our town has a lot of safeguards in place already. We have firemen and policemen and zoning. We have a lot of things that look out for a lot of these. We're very well suited for those things. So I think we need to reassure people that our town will make good decisions as well as the housing people. So
if I could speak to this idea of addressing community concerns, I think that the way you deal with that is opening avenues for two-way communication. So when we talk about community engagement, we talk about 3 general areas. One is ongoing education to create support for housing in general. And that's all year long in a million different ways. And you all will talk about that when you get over, these initial projects. The other one is around planning. That's not really what we're talking about right now, but that's a whole other participatory process where community engagement is important. And then the third general area is around a specific project or development, which is what we're talking about right now. And the ongoing education, that's usually one-way communication. You're getting materials out, you're doing, presentations to the public. You do a little bit of Q&A, but for the most part, it's one way. The community engagement that you do around a specific project or development is generally more two-way communication. And so I think that the way that you deal with that, in a short timeline, is anytime you're talking to a board or committee, you're obviously putting information out, and then you're also creating space for listening. And you put all that information into a document, for example, of community concerns that are arising, and that is content for the messaging task force to kind of tweak your talking points. Same thing with posting something on social media. Don't post anything on social media unless someone also has the time to read the comments and learn from the comments, right? You can get two-way communication that way.
Key point.
So I guess my point is just whenever there's an opportunity for dialogue, take it very seriously, use that data to inform your activities moving forward.
Can you put in answers, list of community cancer and possible answers? Because I think you don't want to just list the answers. You want to be able to come up with an answer to those questions, concerns as well. Can I just ask a procedural question before we finish?
Of course.
All right, so we have our committees and everybody gets busy working. Where does this sharing come in that so that we're all involved in the product as we go forward? We can't do this. It's open meeting law, so you can't respond as a group to any, you can't respond to the group. The two people can work together, but how are we going to facilitate that we all sort of know what's going on without bothering our open meeting law?
Well, one way would be that you all discuss your work plan at your next meeting, but that's not for a month. I'm not sure when your next meeting is. You might want to have another meeting sooner rather than later so that you can get working. But I would encourage you not to feel the need to have everyone's input on every aspect of the work. I think that, you know, the messaging folks need input, but they also need to have leeway to come up with a document that, you know, you can give feedback on, but the document is a document. If you keep tweaking it, your messaging changes and that defeats the purpose.
We've been doing that for a while now, so I need to, but if something is sent to someone email wise, you cannot respond to it. That's the answer?
You can't respond to a quorum, so.
You can't respond to all, but you can respond back to the person who sent it. Is that correct? I'd just like to clarify that because the urge to do that is easy.
I mean, I guess my thinking on it, Nancy, would be like, Bill and I are gonna have our own conversation about messaging. We're only talking to one other person. And then once we have something that we're comfortable with, we can send it to the next group. And then they can talk about it. And, you know, they won't necessarily get to give us feedback, but we could talk about it at our next meeting. So everybody has an opportunity to do a little bit of their own work and then have something to really look at for the next meeting. Does that sound like that might work?
So I think what we're talking about is the exact mechanics of this communication, because I had in mind very much what Katie said. But so Katie and Bill meet, you come up with you look at various things and you come up with your ideas for messaging. And then one of you sends it to, say, Fran or Shelley or both. I don't know what the rules are around here. I mean, I'm still getting used to it. And then that group, the two of them with me or with whoever, Andrea, have a conversation. And then you crystallize it in something, which is then sent on to one of the third group, something like that?
I think so. I think this is it seems a little kind of arduous in the beginning, but I think over time you're gonna come up with a bank of products that you just keep using over and over. It's just until you get there, it's gonna feel like more work, right? But eventually you're gonna have like the 10 things the committee is always wanting to put out into the community, and you say those 10 things all year long because people only hear something if they hear it 7 times, right? And you'll get more comfortable with that content. So when the next project rolls around, you already have your talking points, your whatever that you're gonna adapt. But what I'm saying is that there needs to be a level of comfort with each task force taking on their task and not getting a lot of input, or else you're not going to be able to move forward. So there's a balance there, but I would encourage you not to have a lot of back and forth, or else you're never going to meet deadlines.
Anything
You
else?
can always schedule a special meeting, Nancy, if you see that you need it to bring people together to respond to materials once they're partially created.
Right, because my feeling is I'd like to see the whole thing before everybody's finished all their work, and then I think we need to have a consensus. We don't have to nitpick, but I think we do have to understand where it's going in some way.
Like a media package almost. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's obviously something for the committee to decide.
Okay.
Guys, I'm sorry, I gotta go return phone calls before the select board meeting.
We'll see you
Good luck.
again
Let me
soon.
know. Okay. Bye.
So Nancy, if I can just, wrap up and clarify, based on who's signed up for what the activities are that you've decided, And the important dates that we're going to be looking at, I'm going to fill in that work plan with Nancy, Ren, and Marcia. Then you can go forth into the world. So
Will you
that's
make
my
your
commitment.
slides available to us?
Yeah,
Yes, they're just for you.
Thank
Gonna
you.
ask about that. Yeah, good. Okay.
All right, that's all
Thank
I
you,
have.
Andrea.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Andrea.
Doug.
Was that very
Yeah,
helpful?
good.
Thank you. I hope everybody felt it was helpful. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah.
Definitely.
We have a motion to adjourn.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second.
By roll call, please. Fran,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Katie,
Aye.
Shelley,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Nancy Wren, yes, aye. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you
right,
so
thank you
much.
all.
Good participation.